Well, for some of you, it's good afternoon, and some of you, it's good morning, and some of you, it's your lunch break. So we've got a pretty good crowd gathering here. We're going to let it go just a couple more minutes as people come in. I'm going to try to keep an eye on that waiting room for other late arrivals. So I'll just let you know that my goal today is that we're going to wrap this puppy up by 2 p.m. Central Time. So less than an hour total, including this wonderful time you're spending just sitting there waiting for the magic to start. So we will try to get through all the material we're going to cover by then. There's going to be opportunity. Just tell us some jokes while we wait, Jared. You want to? Oh my gosh. All right. Just full disclosure, I'm Presbyterian. So, love it or hate it. That's what I am. Actually, since I'm Presbyterian, you ought to vote on whether or not you love it or hate it. That'd be very Presbyterian of you. A joke. All right. How many Presbyterians does it take to screw in a light bulb? Well, it actually takes 8. It takes 7 to form a task force to discuss how they're going to get that light bulb changed, and then 1 volunteer just to go ahead and do it while they're still talking.
Sounds about right.
There we go. All right.
Me being Lutheran, how many Lutherans does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't know. How many?
What's this change?
Very nice. Very nice. Another one would be, how many Presbyterians does it take to, to change a light bulb? And the answer is, don't you dare change that light bulb. My great-grandfather donated that light bulb, and it's going to stay right there. All right. Hey, Debbie loves Presbyterians. That's great. All right. It doesn't matter. They're still in the dark. All right. Well, welcome to the Thursday Comedy Stylings of webinar. Here we go, everyone. All right. We're at about 5 after. I think that before we officially start, because I know the trickle is going to continue, let's see. How about a magic trick? Would you like a magic trick? All right. You're not answering it. I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. You ready? Okay. Watch very carefully. By the way, no special effects are being used or green screen. I want to get that on the table right now. Okay, here we go. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Thank you very much. I can see you applauding. I can feel the affirmation of all that is wrong with me in this moment. So thank you. All right. Well, what I would like to do is just kind of jump into things, and I'm going to be doing primarily a screen share because I've got slides, and that way when this recording is made available later, you'll have it actually on the screen, the things that we're talking about. So that'll be good as well. So glad to have you all here as part of the fun. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to get us going. All right. I'll keep the participant window open in case we have some more of those late arrivals that come in. This is to open or not to open, how and when to resume in-person church life. It is not an easy process, and I know many who have sufficiently suffered uh, through this, as many of you probably have already. I want to give you an idea of what it is that we're going to be going through today. First, we're going to find out a little bit about who's here today. And we're going to do a little poll. So if you've never done a Zoom poll before, a question is going to pop up on the screen and you'll choose your answer. It's very exciting. Might be the highlight of your day. And then we're going to jump into specific topics to talk about when it comes to this, to open or not to open. We're going to talk about how we prepare for this decision, how we go through the discernment, how we share what we come up with, and then exploring some other paths that are involved in this process, including, we're going to end by talking about what if you don't open. It wouldn't be fair if I said that the webinar was to open or not to open, and we never talked about not to open. So I think that's a valid conclusion that could come. So there's some people who are on the outside who didn't make it here, who said that they didn't get the link from Ministry Architects. So they are sending out the link again to everyone who registered. So we might see another wave of people joining. Just letting you know that we're going to have that still going on. Okay. So we're going to go through these different phases here, and I want to go ahead, though, and begin by finding out who's here. So let's take a poll. Yay! This is the fun part. All right. So the question that I want to ask you is for you to answer. My church is gathering in person, and then I want you to mark all the things that apply. Maybe not at all, maybe for outside worship, for inside worship, social gatherings, small groups, church meetings, children youth activities, for service or mission activities. Just go ahead and mark as many that apply to you. You guys are doing so great. Look at you all jumping in and answering the poll. We've got almost everybody has given an answer so far. Sometimes on Sundays at my church, we let people vote for which music we're going to sing, and I don't nearly get this kind of return of vote, where almost everyone votes. All right. Well, we've got a really healthy mix here today. Let me show you what we've got here. As you can see, people are in all different sorts of places. 30% of you not at all. So and some of you have waded into the waters a bit, and certainly small groups is pretty popular there. But that's good, because I think that this gathering is going to be good for you to look back a little bit at what led you to the decision, and maybe as you make further decisions and look to open up different aspects, you will maybe change the way you make those decisions. So great. So now let me take you to the next thing. Let's take another poll, right? Because that first one was so much fun. I'm curious as to your reasons, your primary reasons that you resumed in-person gatherings, or that you're considering resuming in-person gatherings. And again, I want you to mark all the primary reasons. Maybe it was a little bit of some of these things, but I'm wondering, when you look at all these choices, you can go ahead and select more than one. But what were the primary reasons that you did some type of reopening? Again, great job on the polling progress. You're all doing such a wonderful job. This can also just be the primary reasons you're considering resuming in-person gatherings. All right. We're almost there. There's just 3 of you left. You know who you are. 2. 2 of you left. You're holding out on me. Come on. Oh, all right, just one more, I believe. I believe it's just one more person. I'm not going to fill out your stupid poll. That's all right. That's pretty good results. All right, so let's see. Let's share those results. So hopefully you can see on your screen that the primary reason is that amongst the people who are gathered here is that we just miss seeing each other. And I hear that a lot, that it's just the act of seeing each other. It's amazing how thrilled people can be like, hey, we met on the lawn and saw each other, and they're excited by that. I think it's interesting to denote that a lot of you are experiencing pressure from people in the church. And while many of you say that, that's for spiritual well-being, I think what's interesting is to note that there's just a couple of you who said that giving was down and worried about finances, and that was a primary reason. Just from my experience in interacting with churches and what we're hearing from out there with some surveys that have been done, actually only about a third of the churches are really experiencing a severe reduction in giving. Maybe a little bit, but only about a third are really experiencing that from what we're hearing. Oh, the results aren't showing on your screen? Oh, okay. It should be sharing. You're not seeing the results? Tell me in the...
I'm seeing them.
Okay. So it's not on some of your screens, and it might just be a function of the device you're on. Trust me, they're great results. They're the greatest results you've ever seen. Nobody gives results as well as I do. So, all right. But yeah, so I'll just tell you that the majority seems to be that people just miss seeing each other. And then in close seconds, where the state said it was okay, so we're going to do it, and others saying that they just needed in-person gathering for spiritual well-being. So, all right, well, very good. Let's go ahead and then break from a little bit of polling. One of the things we have to determine is we have to determine our why. We need to be clear on why others want us to open. And I think that some folks are doing that through surveys, through conversations, but to really be clear on why do people want us to open? And then be clear on why the church leaders would want to open. To be able to articulate that why, to understand it. So what that does is it makes sure that however you do your reopening or whatever contingencies you put together in case you don't reopen to in-person gatherings, that they address those needs. If it's just simply a matter of like they just miss seeing each other, well, then maybe that changes what you decide to make available to the folks in your church. The answer may not always be in-person worship, full-blown, the full show, so to speak. It may be something much simpler, like just having opportunities to gather for short prayer, or outdoor gatherings that aren't necessarily during the worship time. Again, with your youth and children's ministries, it could be different. And also acknowledges that people come to church for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes we can get lured into just thinking about, that, well, the reason why they want to come back is because the people of God really need to gather together and worship God together. And I believe that's true, and I believe that's good, but maybe the main reason why they want to come together is something else. And also we have to be aware of other factors that are working for folks' minds. That they came to church in the past because of maybe they just wanted friends. And so when they miss church, they're missing friends. Maybe they came to church because they wanted something to do to get out of their house. I mean, I'd love to say everyone's coming for the highest of gospel reasons, but people come for different reasons. So just kind of acknowledge that, and maybe in some of our responses, be attentive to that. We also need to consider the cost, which is, of course, the good old time, talents, and treasures, but now it also includes the risk of infection. What is that cost in your area? What will it cost you to resume in person? What will it cost you not resume in-person gatherings? To really think about in terms of you might find that it's a greater cost of your church's time, talents, and treasures to restart in-person gatherings than to not. And to kind of come at it from both of those different angles and understanding what does it cost us. Are we going to lose members? Are we going to lose support of the church? Are people going to lose their connection with God, with one another? Are they going to lose their habit of being engaged in a faith community? It's not just the cost being what goes in an offering or in an online giving. The cost can also be the cost what it is to the community that you're building, and also consider, are these costs different for different ministries of your church? Maybe there's one group that's doing really well with online or remote gathering, and although they might like to be together, they don't need it so much. But maybe there's some ministries, particularly, I'm hearing things from children's ministries and youth ministries. Some people thought, oh, the youth, they're just going to love this. If online, like that's like life for them, isn't it? And it's like, the funny thing is that that's not an automatic that for them. And so consider that the cost is not even for every demographic in your church of losing in person. The last bit of all this, after you consider all the cost, is it worth it? And I'd like to advise you to go ahead and articulate your answer on paper as well as out loud, because I got news for you. You're going to have to articulate your answer on paper and out loud in the future, because people will want to know, what were some of the thought processes that went into this. So at the beginning stage, even before you go through and do all the research and figure out all the things you have to do, it isn't bad to kind of check a baseline and say, how do I feel right now about, is it worth it? And maybe the leadership can have that conversation. And then later on, as you start to gather more information, understand what it's going to take to do this, then the answer to that question is going to be a little smarter, and it's going to be a little more convincing. So the next thing is that I'd like to recommend that you dedicate a team towards this. Simply saying that you're going to have the staff do it to figure out your plans for how you might reopen, or simply saying, well, we'll have, our session do it, or our church board, or to actually dedicate a team towards this. And the best people to do it might be people who are not currently in leadership at your church. First of all, you want to assemble a non-anxious group, if that's even possible during a pandemic, to find a non-anxious group of people. But as much as possible, you need people who are not going to be responding, reacting, and selectively Googling their way into an anxiety pool. We need folks who can kind of calmly go through the material and balance some of the issues, and so they can present options to decision makers. I suggest that you select a group that makes sense to the congregation. Thinking about that when people say, well, who's on that team or who's on that task force? And then you tell them that it's going to make sense why those people are on it. Maybe it's because they represent a lot of different aspects of the ministries at your church. Maybe it's because it represents a wide variety of the people who are going to be considering whether or not to come back for in-person gatherings. Part of it would be the next bullet you see there is that if you can have people who are in the medical profession or in the schools if possible, the people in the schools, especially administrative level, are having to deal with so many of these choices. If they can spare you some time, they are great resources in your congregation. Even the teachers who are being subjected to the changing set of rules that they get in their email inbox every couple of weeks, they would be great to be on that team as well. I think that if you can find someone from a local health department, even better. And it wouldn't be so bad if you invited someone who wasn't part of your church to be on the team. Maybe someone in your church is friends with someone who works at the county health department, and their friend would be willing to sit in on your task force or teams meetings and just kind of be a source of information or provide updates.
What? This is why you need air.
All right. And then we have, extending an invitation to the staff to be part of this group. The staff is going to be affected and afflicted by whatever is come up with by this group and by the decision makers in the church. And you want your staff to be at some level of comfort with the decisions that are being made. And even if they don't take the invitation, extending it can really build some confidence. All right. If you have a question, by the way, I'd suggest go ahead and pop it into the chat room if you want to ask about something along the way, as unmuting and talking is going to be a little bit difficult. The other thing is that I want you to invite the team to review plans of other churches. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And you don't want to just copy and paste from another church because you have your own unique context. But at this point, a lot of churches have plans and they put it out on the internet because they want to communicate it to their congregations. Or you can just contact other local churches who have already reopened and ask them for a copy of their plan. And from that, it can help you to think about your specific situation from different angles. And at the end of the day, the goal of this team is to create recommendations and guide decision makers. I think that if you put the decision-making power, if it's in the same hands as the team that's researching and coming up with possible guidelines, you create an extra layer of tension and anxiety with the whole process. We're not asking you to make the decision. We're asking you to piece together the information and get us a good starting point for the decision makers to decide. So that can be very helpful with the team that you put together. You also need to decode your context because every church is different. So part of decoding your particular context is asking yourself, how well are your remote church efforts working? Is it working? Is it spiritually fulfilling to the people in your church? Yes or no? That might involve some surveying. Your gut reaction may not be correct. Is it, if you're dealing with youth ministry, how's it working for the youth? And talk with them about it. I think that at the end of the day, we're looking to have spiritually fulfilling and nurturing opportunities in our churches. And we might find that people feel pretty good about what you're doing, and that's going to influence the way you make your decisions. You need to know what the people of the church want and what do they need. And you need to know, are they willing to come? I'll tell you that the current trend that we're seeing is that people are getting about 30 to 50% attendance in their in-person gatherings. And so if you've started up some in-person gatherings and you're seeing 70, 80% return, you are killing it. You're doing great. And if you've been a little discouraged because you're only seeing about 35% come back, that's pretty normal. There is a good percentage of folks who are not coming back for a while, or at least don't want to be guinea pigs 1 through 20 in whatever experiment is run. They're the folks who don't run to the barbershop the minute it opened up to get their hair cut. They waited a little bit. They're the folks who didn't run out to eat at the restaurants as soon as they were reopened. They waited a little bit. So we see one, Joe here, who's with us, said they restarted gathering and saw only about 20% of their summer attendance. Yeah. And some of it can be your context. I mean, just think about it. If you're a congregation that leans into an older demographic, into a larger at-risk demographic, those percentages are going to get lower. And so, yeah, thanks for sharing, Joe. It's good to have another kind of data point there. If anyone else wants to go ahead and share that in the chat room for others to see, that could be helpful. Oh, Beth, what a great question for Joe. For those that attended, how did they feel about the 20% attendance? Was it still worth it to them? That's a really good question. And that's part of what we talked about with, is it worth it earlier? Because what you're going to return to is not the church that you attended in February. What you're going to return to probably is something that's going to involve mask and social distancing and no huggy hug and leaving in a very organized manner and not that general fellowship before and after and probably not congregational singing. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So go ahead, Joe, if you want to give some more feedback on yours, and I'll let you guys just comment with each other a little bit in the chat room. All right. So also, what can your facility facilitate? You may not have the ability to do social distancing because of the design of your worship space. You may not have a good place even for meetings to come together. You might find that you don't have a good room that you feel good about putting those 30 people other than the sanctuary, and maybe the sanctuary isn't a good space for that type of small group gathering. Do you have special staff considerations? What if your pastor is in an at-risk group? That's part of your context you need to think about. What if others who are involved in worship leadership are in some sort of at-risk group? How can you make it a safe space for them, or how can you make it okay for them not to be there? Because some of those super volunteers or employees may worry about what's expected of them if they don't show up. So also, do you have volunteer buy-in? I mean, are you going to be able to have the volunteers to pull off what you're thinking? Because I can tell you right now that the same people who volunteered for being ushers in your church before are not automatics. So overall, with decoding your context is really understanding what people want, what they're willing to do, what you're able to put together, and to consider all those factors as part of this process. Great conversations going on in the chat room, so I invite you just to pop back and forth and listen to that and enter into it. That's half the value of one of these gatherings, is that interactivity. Discerning, there's some basic issues. I'm not going to go through all the guidelines on how you should clean your church or wearing masks and what the social distance is and how to plot your entry and exit paths for people to come in and what's the suggested signage, because that in itself is an hour-long or 3-hour-long webinar. There's a lot of guidance out there on those logistics. I'm trying to have us spend a little more time on the actual discernment process of to open or not to open. But just know there are state and local requirements you need to think about, CDC guidelines, your insurance company's requirements. So far, most of the people I've talked to in churches, their insurance company has said, yeah, we got nothing on this. Like there's no precedent, there's no guidelines. They just say, you just follow whatever the state rules are and good faith effort. And that's what we're hearing from a lot of insurance companies to churches. But you should check with your own insurance company because they can all be different. And I hate to say it, but we live in a society where people like to find ways to sue. And we also live in a society where insurance companies try to find ways not to pay. So it's good to get your insurance company sending you something in writing that says, no, we do not require anything from you. Clean, or if they do, what it is. Cleaning procedures and ordering time for supplies. Just know that if you want to have, plenty of hand sanitizer, you might have to order it way in advance. I mean, you can certainly, there's a lot they've got at places like Costco and Sam's, and you can find a lot of them there. But some of those automatic dispenser units that a lot of our churches have had on hand, those refill bags are not in, they're in short supply. So you might need to have alternate ways of doing that. So check on that. And of course, like I said, you're going to need new volunteers, and new training is going to be needed because it's a different role for people, and a lot of folks will not feel comfortable. All right. Now, part of the discernment is asking good questions and getting tips. So what you have on the screen there is these are all the online resources under the COVID-19 section of our website that we have at Ministry Architects. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put that link also in the chat room so that you have it there. And then you can go ahead and click on that if you want, and you'll have it for later. On that, you'll see, when you go to just COVID-19, you'll see all of these different articles and links to tips and good questions to ask. And you can click on each one and see the full article for each one of these as well. But there's just lots of good resources on the Ministry Architects website. So rather than repeating all of what you can find on the web, just go explore yourself. We'll spend our time talking about other things today. Okay. Now, in terms of sharing what you come up with, phasing the approach is a really wise way to do that. You see a lot of the states doing similar things. Express your plan as a series of phases, but the church needs to be free to move back and forth between phases. It can't be a thing where it's like, once we move to, into the yellow phase, we never go back. I mean, you have to clearly express that the church may have to move back and forth depending upon the number of cases or deaths that start happening within your county, your area. It's important that you have that. So the church also should not feel pressure to detail the qualifications for each phase. It's very attractive to be able to tell people, as soon as the number of cases in our county is rising by less than 2.3%, and the number of deaths is not increased in X number of days, I mean, then you're stuck to that. And I think that what I would say is that you can have some internal things, but I think to say that the general categories of things that the leadership is going to be considering when moving between phases is good. But I think if you lock yourself in, I don't know about you, but my experience is that I have never found myself 2 weeks later during this pandemic feeling like feeling the same place that I'm at the same place I was 2 weeks before. It's constantly changing. And so I think setting up a guideline that 2 months from now you're going to adhere to a certain percentage of increases in cases in your county is that's a tough kind of commitment to make. I think you need to clearly establish who decides which phase applies. Who makes the decision that we're moving to phase yellow? And that everyone knows where that sits. Because they might just think it's up to, say, the youth minister, or maybe they think it's up to the senior pastor, even though they know the way your polity works in your church. Why hasn't Pastor Rob moved us to yellow phase? Well, because Pastor Rob's Presbyterian and he's got to wait for the session to tell him what to do. I mean, whatever the right answer is in your context, but they need to understand. Also, you need to make sure that in your phasing, you understand what needs to be done to prepare for the next coming phase. The move from outdoor worship to indoor worship is a whole lot of preparation, and you should have that in your plan. What do we need to do before we can implement the next phase, as opposed to just suddenly declaring, hey, y'all, next Sunday, we're going to be inside, and then scrambling to get the things done that are necessary. What you might find is that it's a couple of weeks to move from one phase to the other. Once you decide you're ready to, it might take you a couple of weeks. You might have to train volunteers. You might have to acquire certain resources, no contact thermometers. Who knows what you're going to need for the next phase the way you line it up. So you're going to need to articulate that and to detail the requirements and the restrictions in each phase. So everybody knows when we move to the phase that has inside worship, there's a whole new set of rules. And here's what they are. And if you come, you're going to adhere to these. And just a side note on that, you need to be prepared for what are you going to do when people don't follow the rules? What are you going to do? And I know you can say, well, we have just such a lovely church and everybody just would follow the rules and no one, but when Jim and Betty come to the door and they say, look, we don't have it. We know we don't have it. We don't care if we get it. So we're coming. How you're going to tell with love, tell Jim and Betty with love, I'm sorry, but you just can't. And also visitors, because, hey, who knows? A visitor might wander in during this pandemic into your church and they're not going to be prepared. They're not going to know. So you're going to have to quickly inform people who pop in without having read the email and the letter that you sent out. Maybe having spare mask and if that's what's required and a quick summary sheet available for folks. The last thing is that with this phased approach is that to name the phases with colors, descriptions, or cute names, avoid numbers. Why do I say avoid numbers? Because if we made it up to phase 4 and then we got to go back to phase 3, it's just kind of depressing. And the numbers imply that we're just going to keep moving forward. Not that there might be some back and forth. So, name it Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Name it red, yellow, or red, orange, yellow, green. Name it outside, inside, remote. I don't know. Give it names that you can move between as opposed to feeling like it's a progression. You're eventually going to have to communicate your plans. And as you communicate your plans, you need to keep everyone updated on the progress. What's the task force doing? What's the planning team doing? Keep people informed. They'll give you more time if they know what's going on. So if it takes you a month to put together the plans, people are not just sitting wondering if your church is ever going to make any decisions. Give the people a point of contact for questions or concerns. Otherwise, the rumor engine starts revving up. And then they start calling. And then they're going to call the church secretary. Then they're going to call the youth pastor. Then they're going to call someone they know who's on session to find out what's going on. Just tell them, if you want to know what's going on, contact this person. This person is who can answer your questions and can relay any concerns or ideas you have to the team that's making the decision. It's good because it gives the people in your church a feeling of being connected to the process, knowing exactly where to go and not feeling lost or forgotten in the process. Once your plans are decided, you have to communicate it in various forms. This is like a lesson for the church in general. Well, I put it in the bulletin for 4 weeks and no one saw it, Well, now most of us don't even have bulletins if we're doing remote worship. So, or I put it in the newsletter, or I sent out the email, or I put it on our social media. Should you do it? Yes, all those things, yes. And out loud in worship and everything else you can do because they need to hear it. Communication and expectation setting prior to your initial gathering, whatever that is, whether it's a small group or a worship or a youth group or whatever, is key. Expectation setting. This is what it's going to be like when you come. We're going to be doing this and we're going to be doing this. And this is what you need to do. Once they get there, there should be clear signage and other forms of instructions. This is not a situation where you need people showing up, not understanding where to go or what to do. Because remember, this is going to be launching a new church. People are used to coming in the door they come in. They're used to parking the way they park. They're used to sitting where they like to sit. I'll tell you a story about a buddy of mine who was part of a congregation, and they had all the pews roped off, and then they let people just go on in, and people just said, "Oh, well, my pew is roped off," so they moved the piece of tape and put it on a different pew, and then sat in the pew they wanted to, which totally messed up the whole spacing of pews, but they didn't care. So you're going to be dealing with old habits, but you're also going to be dealing with folks who have no idea how to navigate in this new space. And you'll need to really guide people along as if it was the first day of a brand new church that was being launched. We have one thing in the chat room. Somebody talked about making a welcome video. That is wonderful. People will watch videos more than they'll read your long dissertations, especially on social media. Just taking out the old iPhone and filming yourself as you walk around the church and explaining things. I've seen a lot of great videos put out by churches. It's a great way to communicate. The next thing is you need to plan for infections. You need to, part of the other paths is someone in your congregation is going to get COVID-19 if they haven't already. And what I mean by that is that someone who came to worship last Sunday is going to get COVID-19. What's the response plan? How do you plan to to respond in terms of, if one person gets it, are we taking a 2-week break from our gatherings? And what's the thresholds? Do we have to get 5 people infected before we put a pause on our in-person gatherings? Is it are we going to notify folks? You have to be very careful, because as people share personal health information with you, if you notice that, like, oh, that's the person who was sitting next to those 3 families, are you going to notify those families? Those are some tough waters to navigate, and you need to get on the same page as your congregation when you do that. I personally would suggest that you move towards a plan that simply informs folks that you had someone at the gathering, and if they're comfortable sharing their name, then you can share it. But if they're not, then you don't. And you just tell folks it was someone, and everyone's going to understand the privacy, or they should, because they wouldn't want their health information just handed around. But prepare the church. They need to know that someone is going to get it, and that's going to be part of the natural rhythm of being in this space. You talk to anyone who's in the school systems, they're going to tell you they are preparing for what they're going to do when there's a positive case in their schools. They're not so naive to think we're going to pull off a whole year of school in person and no one's going to ever get it. So, and the last thing is, how are you going to care for the sick? How are you going to care for those who contract the virus? And because they're going to be dealing with a lot, especially if they came to one of your gatherings and now they have it, they're going to be dealing with a lot. And we need to minister to them in particular. Another part of the other paths is to continue your remote church. Whatever you're doing remotely, remember that gathering in person for most churches means gathering for remote as well. There may be some of you who are in smaller congregations where everybody's leaving the remote type of church activities we're doing, and everybody's going to come for the in-person. But looking at our attendance numbers, we need to think about if only 30 or 40% show up, that means you've got, like the current trend is 50 to 70% are not coming back. So when we start it up, we don't really want to make them second-class citizens. the sick, or those who are in at-risk groups. It's very un-Jesus to make the sick a second-class citizen in your church. Just say that. So if it follows the trends that we're seeing, the majority of your folks will still need remote church if they were using it before. So I think sometimes in our churches we're thinking, oh, we're so tired of this remote church stuff. Let's start up some in-person. Let's start up in person because we're tired of the remote. I have news for you. Starting up in person means, for most of you, doing both. And that's true in the school systems as well. You talk to school leaders and they know that bringing the kids in means doing in person and remote. So you're going to have both, more than likely. And also, we don't want to lose what we've gained by downgrading remote church. There's some churches that, like, when there was no in person, the remote church was really geared well to the person at home. That camera was right up near the pastor, and there were prayer activities that really matched the fact that we're at home and we're not all gathered in a space. And what happens in a lot of churches that when they move back to the in-person, I've seen this on a couple of ones that have been posted online, they just go to the remote camera that's 200 feet away, and that's what people end up following online, and you're going to lose what you gained from the remote church. It's kind of like, I call it like watching people ride a roller coaster. If I had a relative at home who couldn't go with us to the amusement park, but I wanted them to experience some of the things with us, I wouldn't say, let me turn on the camera and I'm going to show you, there's your brother and sister riding the roller coaster up there. Look at that, right? I'd probably break one of the rules or the law. This is terrible at church gathering like this. I'm telling you how to break the law or break a rule. But I'd want to, like, have that camera mounted, right? Somehow taped onto my chest so that brother or sister at home gets to really feel the roller coaster if I'm trying to include them, right? And so in church, how can we get those people at home to really feel it if what we're offering is a sneak peek into what the in-person people are feeling? We don't want them, again, to feel like second-class citizens, like they're just being allowed, do you just sit over there and watch what we do? It might even mean you have to offer two services. There's the in-person gathering, which you may or may not stream or whatever, and then you might want to have a specific remote church service that's really aimed at that 50 to 70% of your folks who are still at home. I also want to say, just be careful with language and messaging when you return. You don't want to be up in front of a congregation or up in front of a youth group and say, well, it's just so great to see all of you here who really trust the Lord and trust in God's protection, as opposed to those losers at home who are watching over the camera, who don't really love Jesus and are afraid. Of course, you're not going to say the second part, but the first part rules them out. And you have, how are different populations going to, how are they going to receive being disconnected? Whether it's the older folks in your congregation or the younger folks who feel a little uncertain, or the parents who don't feel comfortable bringing their kids into the building during this time. And we want to be careful that our language and our messaging always makes them feel we're just as glad that they're connected as the folks who are in person. What if you don't open? What if you don't? What if you consider the cost? You ask, is it worth it? And the answer you come back with is, no, it's not worth it. Well, maybe the church without a building has space to transform. Maybe this could be really good for the church to not be able to gather in that way, to force us to think about what is the real goal of the ministry that we're doing. If the goal of our ministry is to put bottoms in pews, then it is all about reopening the building. But if the goal is to build disciples, and if over half of our folks are not going to come back in person, then maybe if the church threw all of its efforts into effective discipling in the midst of this pandemic, as opposed to trying to juggle an in-person service or an in-person small group, and put it into a real dedication to discipling, that might not be such a bad thing. Also, consider the overlap of your non-remote but willing to attend. And what I mean by that is that if you do a survey of your congregation and you say, oh my goodness, 20% of our congregation is not doing the remote worship, and another 10% says they're doing it, but they hate it. Oh my goodness, we have to do something. We got 30% that aren't involved and another 10% that just hate it. But if you ask those same 30%, well, if we did an in-person gathering with masks and social distancing, would you come? And if they go, oh no, I'm not coming back till there's a vaccine. Well, then doing in person isn't going to address the problem of those who said they were not spiritually fulfilled by the service, or they're not feeling connected, or they're just not doing it. So be careful that you're not building something for people who are not going to come. Also, perhaps not all gatherings start up in the same phase. You might decide that some of our groups need to be in person, outside maybe, or inside with proper distancing and masks, but maybe there's other parts of our ministry that can stay remote. Maybe we can keep doing committee meetings through Zoom. Maybe session can continue. Maybe there's not a need to put ourselves into that situation in all aspects of the church. And maybe you can move certain ministries into different phases that you've outlined. I think it's also important that you acknowledge the lament. People are sad. People have lost something. For some people, they have lost the main interaction and activity of their lives. Some have lost the feeling of being connected to their closest friends. And we need to acknowledge that lament. And so if we decide not to open, we need to figure out how to, on a regular basis, acknowledge it and recognize that it's okay. I also want to encourage you that if you make this decision, move from survive to thrive. If you make the decision not to gather in person, really you should probably do this even if you do decide to gather in person. Instead of saying, how are we going to survive this? Ask, how can we thrive in this? What can we do to invest more in what we're doing remotely or what we're doing without gathering, such that we actually perhaps could grow spiritually, such that the formation of our people could be even more significant. Maybe we can build relationships in ways that we never could with certain folks in our church. I know a lot of churches have started to see families and individuals show up for remote worship that they couldn't get to show up for in person for years. So I think too, like there's a lot of great ideas going on in the chat room about how to help people who are not tech savvy to get connected. Great terms like tech deacon, virtual usher. Think about how can we get the folks who aren't connected. Maybe it's calling them up and stepping them through the process of learning how to get Zoom working on their computer or their iPad. Maybe it's a case of someone who is even kind of befuddled with the idea of calling in and punching in a conference code to listen over the phone. So what you do is you have someone who's already connected on their phone, and then they do a three-way call. They just call the person and they say, hi, Jenny, hold on a second. I'm going to connect you with the worship service. And then they merge the calls. And now Jenny doesn't even need to dial the phone. She just has to answer it. And now she's connected with the audio of your worship service. There's lots of ways to do that. Also, I want to say that, like I said, identify the lost sheep of remote church. Those people who maybe you can work to get connected or to connect with in different ways. Maybe they'll never get onto Zoom with you, but maybe you just need to throw a lawn chair in the back of your car and go over to their house and sit in their driveway and pray with them Maybe even bring them a portion of the recording of some of the music that you had to share with them. Lots of opportunities there. Own the decision with clear reasons and purpose. Do it with hope of what could be, rather than just with feeling defeated. I would avoid setting future dates for reopening, telling everyone, well, I think we're going to reopen in October 1st, and then it gets near October. I think we're going to open on November 15th, and then it gets to November. I think we're going to, that just is going to suck the life out of people. Telling people this is the decision we're making now, and we are constantly monitoring the situation, and we are going to keep good communication with you so you know where we are thought wise, but there's no sense setting a date. And also consider that not opening could help planning. Consider that you have staff who are right now trying to figure out the plan if we open, the plan if we don't open, the plan if we semi-open. If you could just tell the staff, we're not opening any in person, then they have just one thing to plan towards. It might seem like an impossible task, but at least they can focus on that task at hand. Maybe you've heard all this and you're thinking, I need some help. Obviously, Ministry Architects does a lot of great work. They helped my church out incredibly years ago. And then I've had the blessing to be involved with them in recent years. And many of you are former clients or current clients of Ministry Architects. They do have a reopening consulting package, which will help you with setting your strategy and writing your guidelines and communications and safety training, and then implementation support and coaching you through the process of going through all this, as well as through the opening and adjustments.
This fresh folk like this, it gets so bad at night that I don't know what to do, especially at night.
If that's something that you're interested in, you can go to ministryarchitects.com/contacts, and then someone will be in touch with you, and that's a great way to do that. I'm going to go ahead and put that link into the chat room so that you have it as well. So you can just click on it there and then have it for later if you want to fill it out. Just want to have a conversation, explore the possibilities with someone. And then I'd say that we're just about at 2 o'clock at this point in our webinar, and I'm willing to stay a few more minutes if anybody wants to ask particular questions. I'd say let's go ahead and throw it in the chat room if you have a particular question or something you want to talk about. Before we get into that, I just want to say thank you to everybody who checked in and participated in today's webinar. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it's given you some things to think about and ways to frame your own discernment. So if there's anyone that has a question, you can put it in the chat room, and we'll try to kind of address it together as a group. Someone wants to know, will we be sending or posting the slides? Yes, we're this recording as well as the slides should be on the Ministry Architects website within 24 hours. So we're going to collect the recording after this, and I'm going to send my slides over to the website folks, and then they should be up, easy to get to from the first page. And also, where everyone's going to get a follow-up email that'll give you a link to the recording. So that'll be good too. Oh, someone who has a meeting tonight as well. So I understand. All right. So we will we'll figure out how to get that to you. Anyone else have questions? I'm getting some private questions that people want me just to type to them. So all right. Well, All right, great. This has been good. If, like I said, we'll have everything on the website within the next day, and certainly you can go through the context there. And I wish you the best in this discernment. This is impossible. I mean, I I'm really regretting I skipped pandemics at seminary, and so I never did take that class. Maybe some of you did, but it is an unprecedented time. I hope you're in a church where people give you some grace, and if you're not, I hope you have friends and family that'll give you some grace, because these are hard decisions. But I think that if people know that you love them and you really just want the best for them, I think we can access a lot of grace through this situation. I think if we try to come off as the perfect gurus that know the right answer and everyone else is stupid if they don't agree with us, that never goes well for me. But I think that if we can just say, look, we love you, and this is what we think is the best way to love you. And we realize that the church down the street loves their congregation a little different. Maybe they're making different decisions, but this is what we think we're supposed to do. And I think it'll work out. I think it'll work out. All right, y'all. Well, have a blessed day. And if we at Ministry Architects can be of any help to you, please go to that contact, and we'll get back with you, and we'll also give you some follow-up emails. All right, everybody wave goodbye.